Good morning, everybody. My name is Nicole Nave, and I will be one of your lab leaders and instructors throughout your week at the Detroit Urban Debate Week Camp. Today, we will get the opportunity to explore what policy debate is, as well as learn a lot of the key definitions and the aspects and methods that we need to know to fully participate in camp and fully understand policy debate as an activity. So I want you all to take out a notebook, pen, paper, something to write with, a Google Doc, Microsoft Word, whatever you all are going to use throughout the duration of camp to keep track of your notes. Because you are going to want to keep track of notes to ensure that you have all of the information to participate in all of the activities, as well as after camp is over to keep your notes. Because policy debate is filled with information and research, and we are definitely going to get the opportunity to learn that today. So I want you all to go ahead and get that open. I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you all, and we're going to get started. Policy debate. What is debate? Well, simply, it's an argument. It's a meeting of opinions. It's a melting of the minds. Debate is everywhere. It is all around us. We oftentimes find ourselves debating with our parents, our siblings, but also the debates on Twitter, on social media, politics, presidential candidates. There is just always someone in opposition to another. So, why debate? Well, debate can be an extremely rewarding activity because it gives you the opportunity and exposure to different cultures, different thoughts, as well as different regions of the country, city, and sometimes the world, depending on your experience. It provides the opportunity to research, learn about politics, as well as international relations, social structures, and philosophical understandings of the world as well. It'll give you the opportunity to truly be ahead of any of the other kids in your age group who aren't doing debate. You stand out and you get the opportunity for different scholarships and educational aspects like no other activity in the entire world. The most scholarships that are given out are in debate. I know some people are like, wait, more than college? Yes, more than football, more than basketball, other sports. Debate is the number one provider of academic scholarships. So definitely take this opportunity and soak up as much knowledge and information as you can. A lot of you are probably wondering, is debate hard? Well, just like anything in the world, it is about what you put into it, and you'll get what you put into it in return. But honestly, debate is a game. It is also a point of advocacy and a training ground for the real world in order for you to understand how to better be a better person and policymaker. In debate, you will get the opportunity to be a player. You'll be a policymaker and role play that role. Debate is also seen as a game because the judges decide a winner and a loser. You also receive ranks and points. I'll get into the specificity of those when I get into the role of the judge later on in the presentation. Policy debate. Well, policy debate is unique in all forms of debate because policy debate has a plan and a resolution, which provides a specific topic and a point of focus. This point of focus allows for teams to know what to talk about and how to talk about it. Not only that, but policy debate gives you the opportunity to work in a partnership with a team. You will work with another individual, and you all will both get the opportunity to represent your side of the speech. You'll debate another team. Then you'll understand the structural aspects of debate, along with the judge. Policy debate is unique because, unlike a lot of forms of debate, the resolution or the topic remains the same for the entire year, which means students this year will get the opportunity to talk about this resolution, which is resolved. The United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the United States in one or more of the following: forensic science, policing, and sentencing. This resolution is extremely unique in this time because I want you all to think what is currently happening in our everyday lives. On media, we are surrounded constantly with the need and the call for reform for the police. This topic is extremely inherent and gives us the opportunity to truly research and stay up to date on our evidence. It's up to y'all to go beyond the material that we give you all and apply the everyday skills and knowledge that you all have to fully expand and explore this topic. So you all will get the opportunity to be affirmative and negative. To be affirmative means that you affirm the resolution. You agree with what the resolution has presented. In this case, you would agree that the United States federal government should enact some form of substantial criminal justice reform in one of the following or more of the areas. To be negative means you negate. To negate means you believe that the resolution or the call that the affirmative has proposed is not sufficient or not a good one. Previously stated, there is a structure to policy debate. It is not simply a place where we get to just argue freely, because that would take up far too much time, considering that a policy debate is already an hour and a half long with the current structure. This structure was necessary to not take our entire days because all debaters become impassioned. Now, first part of our structure is constructive speech. A constructive speech is exactly how it says in its context. It is the opportunity for you to construct, to build your case using evidence, data, and knowledge to support your claims, your warrants, and create impacts. You are going to get the opportunity to tell the judge why you believe your side is important. Then cross-examination happens. Cross-examination is a tool used to question your opponent. You get the opportunity to learn more as well as ask points of clarification to better understand the point. Then you'll give your last speech, which is called a rebuttal. A rebuttal is where you get to rebut your last response. Sometimes people will attempt to add new arguments into their rebuttals. This is not allowed. You must extend your previous arguments and tell your judge why you believe you should win. Then there is a reason for decision, also known as an RFD. The reason for decision will be provided to you by a judge. The judge will give you points of improvement as well as tell you things that they thought you did well in the round, and also suggestions for arguments that could have been made. Now, the role of the affirmative. You must provide the burden of proof, which means you have to explain how the affirmative makes the world a better place in the status quo. The first affirmative constructive, the 1AC, is 8 minutes long. The first affirmative constructive is created before the tournament. You are given this in order to fully study and understand the topic before you come to the tournament. The first affirmative constructive will provide us with all of the topics necessary to begin our debate. Then there will be cross-examination. Cross-examination, as I said before, is a point of questions, clarification, and further exploration. You will have 3 minutes to ask questions. The 2AC, which is the second affirmative constructive, has a specific role to answering the negative. The 2AC attempts to answer the arguments made by the 1AC, but it's also the job of the 2AC to preempt the arguments that will be made by the next 2 negative speeches. The 2AC must therefore make much more extensive arguments in certain areas than the 1AC. This is definite disadvantage strategically, as the arguments made by the 2AC must be good enough to withstand the entire block of negative attacks. You must also remember to use the 1AC. Most 2ACs will attempt to use arguments and evidence which have been forwarded in the 1AC to answer arguments made by the 1AC. Affirmative writes their first constructive speech not only to make their cases to the judge, but to also provide himself with arguments that will be usable by the 2AC. This is the last speech in which the affirmatives are usually allowed to make new arguments. This is also the affirmative's last constructive speech. After this, there will be another 3-minute cross-examination where the 2AC will answer questions provided by the first negative speaker. Then the 1AR, which is presumed to be the hardest speech in debate. The reason why it's the hardest is because the affirmative must begin speaking after 13 minutes where the negative has done nothing but speak. You have to come up with something memorable. You have to remember your pieces of your affirmative that are worth extending. But you also have to try to see if maybe the negative did not answer a piece of your affirmative after coming back from those 13 minutes. The 2AR has to respond to both the 2NC and the 1NR in a very small period of time. Remember, y'all, rebuttals are only 5 minutes long. The 1AR tends to be the fastest speech of the entire debate. This is the speech in which the affirmative begins to select issues on which they will base the debate off of. Good 1ARs will make these issues clear to the judge while still giving the 2AR plenty of options, meaning I'm going to begin to narrow down the most important arguments that the affirmative has made. But also, don't forget your previous speeches. The 1AR must answer the arguments made by the 2NC and the 1NR, but don't forget to extend the arguments made in the 2AC. Even though it may seem like the 1AC was a long time ago, remember to continue to extend your case arguments as well. Then after that, for the affirmative, we have the second affirmative rebuttal, which is the very last speech, the final word. The 2AR is probably one of the most powerful speeches in the round because you cannot get any response. There is no more arguments to be made. Your opponents can't say nothing. You are the last speaker. The 2AR usually walks a fine line between extending the arguments made by their partner and making arguments which may not have been made before in the debate. Because new arguments are not allowed in most rebuttal speeches, it is important to stay on the right side of the line. Just because no one is responding to you doesn't mean you get to make new arguments, because rebuttals do not allow for new arguments. But the 2AR is a really good opportunity for you to tell the story of the 1AR and the 2AC and the 1AC. So tell that story. The 2AR traces the affirmative line of argumentation from the 1AC to the final speech, making the judge understand why, in light of the argumentation made by the 2NR, why the affirmative should win the round. As with the 2NR, this story usually appears in the form of an overview to the speech. It's important to remember that even though this is your last speech, this is your last rebuttal, this is your opportunity to explain the importance of the 1AC all the way through the rest, because your entire speech is important. Now, the role of the negative. Now, the role of the negative, the burden of rejoinder is to disprove the affirmative. The 1 and C is the first negative constructive. The 1 and C is 8 minutes long. And the role of the 1 and C for case arguments is the negative make arguments that part of the affirmative case is incorrect. There is no problem. The present system is sufficient to cope with the problem, or the plan is insufficient to cope with the problem in a significant way. The negative may also argue that any argument made by the affirmative is not only incorrect, but is actually the opposite of the truth. The negative can also argue off-case positions, such as topicality, disadvantages, counterplans, and critiques. But today, we will be learning specifically about case arguments and topicality. After the first negative constructive, where the negative has constructed their speech in opposition to the affirmative, there will be a 3-minute cross-examination. This 3-minute cross-examination will be performed by the first affirmative speaker. The first affirmative speaker will ask the first negative speaker questions. Then there will be the second negative constructive, which will begin what we call the negative block. Now, there is a huge advantage to being affirmative, which is that you speak first and you speak last. The advantage to being negative is that you have the negative block, which is 13 minutes of back-to-back negative speeches. The second negative constructive, then the 1 and R, which is the first negative rebuttal. This gives the opportunity for that advantage for the negative to gain ahead, because now the 1AR will happen with only 5 minutes to answer the 13 minutes of the negative block. It's extremely important for you and your partner to act as a team during the negative block to ensure that you don't overlap in information. You all, during prep time, need to have a conversation about what arguments will be utilized by whom in order to properly utilize your negative block. So extending part of the 1 and C, the 2 and C must choose some, but not all of the arguments made by the 1 and C to extend. The 2N and the 1N must communicate with each other to make sure that they are not trying to extend the same arguments. Most of the 2 and C will spend time extending the arguments made in the 1 and C. The 2 and C must also answer the arguments made by the 2AC. The negative arguments may change substantially from their original form during this speech. There is no requirement that the 2 and C cover particular arguments, but most 2 and Cs will cover things like plan arguments, especially disadvantages. New arguments are not very common, but 2 and Cs will sometimes make completely new arguments. Even when the 2 and C does not make a completely new argument, there will often be new links, impacts, or specific case or counterplan arguments. The 1AR can respond freely to both kinds of new arguments. Then doing the first negative rebuttal. This will happen after the second negative cross-ex happens. That will be the last cross-examination of the entire round. The second negative cross-ex will be the end of cross-examination. Then it'll be the first rebuttal. So remember, rebuttals are 5 minutes long, and this is the opportunity for you to have your last word, to make your even if statements, and to really emphasize to the judge why you believe you win. But you also have to remember, in rebuttals, there are no new arguments that happen. So in the 1 and R, you're extending other 1 and C arguments. In many ways, the 1 and R is like having several more minutes of a 2 and C. This is a second speech in what is called the negative block, because the 2 and C and the 1 and R are like two parts of the same speech. The 1 and R must be careful to extend different but complementary arguments from the 2 and C. Extending disadvantages, the 1 and R might extend arguments against the affirmative case. Unlike the 2 and C, the 1 and R is not allowed to make new arguments unless they are in response to arguments made by the 2AC. So it's important that you all pick and choose. There is no requirement to the 2 and C and the 1 and R to extend all the arguments made by the 1 and C. Most negatives pick and choose their best arguments. However, the affirmative can extend arguments that aren't answered by the negative block. So it is important that you all cover the affirmative. If the negative does not extend a disadvantage that the affirmative has termed, the affirmative is free to claim the disadvantage as an affirmative advantage. So it's important that you pick and choose what you're going to go for, but you also look and think about what the affirmative has said. Because being negative is not simply about negating and having your information together, but also applying that to why the affirmative is bad. That is the burden of rejoinder. You must prove why the affirmative is not a good idea, why the affirmative is not sufficient enough to solve what it has proposed, or why there is something that is already happening that is similar to the affirmative, that is a reason why the affirmative should not happen. So those are the roles of the negative. And like I said before, there's a multiplicity of different formats a negative can take. You can have case arguments, you can argue topicality, disadvantage, counterplans, and critiques. I will get into each one of those methods later on. I know a lot of you all are like, wow, that is a lot of structure. I thought we were going to be able to argue freely. I thought I was going to be able to say what I wanted to say for how long I was going to be able to say it. Unfortunately, that is not how debate goes. And there is a lot of information, but luckily we have came up with a really unique and cool way to help you keep track of that information that will help you throughout the debate and work as a guide, almost like a tracker for you to participate in debate. This is a note-taking method called flowing. You all will get the opportunity throughout camp to practice flowing and get to see what it's like to flow a real debate round when the demonstration debates happen. So when you're flowing, you can think about it as doing little abbreviations, text lingo, shorthand, your own personal code, because your flow is going to be for you. This is something for you to read, not for someone else. But these notes are meant to help for you to write down questions. It's important for you to write down evidence so you're able to refer back in your speech to the evidence. But it's also important for you to keep track of the arguments that were answered to, the things that were not responded to, so you can properly respond and make the arguments necessary to advance in the rounds. And this is how you keep track, by writing those things down. You're not going to be able to just remember off the top of your head. I know a lot of y'all are like, well, I'm going to be able to get up and respond. That's not actually how it happens. These notes are important. And I really encourage you all to start practicing now by listening to music watching the news and taking notes and trying to get as much information as you can in a short amount of time as possible, because it will change your life, and it'll also be what we call a portable skill that you will be able to take on with you through college to be able to take notes effectively and efficiently. So that is my little spill on flowing. We will get into the nitty gritty and actual practice this method throughout camp. A judge. So it is really important that you think about who your judge is, why that person is in the back of your room, and what you can do to adapt to that person. So a judge provides the decision and reason for the decision at the conclusion of the debate. They will offer feedback to both debaters on things that they can do to improve. They will assign each individual student points based on the performance in the debate. Judges are sometimes parents, they're sometimes alumni, other students, previous coaches. It really just depends on your tournament, your region, and the variation that you will get in your judging. But to know more information about your judge, a lot of the times your judge will have what is called a paradigm. A paradigm is a short little snippet about your judge that will tell you, these are the arguments that I like. This is what I like to hear. I need you to do these things in order to win. I like for students to act this way. I like for cross-examination questions to be this format. They will give you kind of directions for how they vote and the issues that they find particularly moving for them to vote on. So if your judge does have a paradigm, I encourage you to look at it. And if your judge does not have a paradigm, I encourage you to ask them about their paradigm and the arguments that they evaluate and how they evaluate them, so you can know more about them as an adjudicator. But judges also have a really particular role. Like I said earlier, debate is a game because you win or you lose. There's a winner or a loser. And a judge is like a referee. They tell you who gets points for what. They tell you how those points are evaluated. So you will get what is called a ballot. A ballot will be a piece of paper or an electronic thing that tells you who the winner or the loser of the debate is. A judge will rank you 1 through 4, because remember, there are 4 debaters in each room. You will also get speaker points from 0 to 30. 30 being the absolute perfect, 0 being something that I don't think you would ever get, because you all have already done something incredible that a lot of adults cannot do, which is public speaking, which is the number one fear in the world. So pat yourselves on the back already for doing that. I know that's corny, but I don't care. Pat it up, pat it up. You on Zoom talking to strangers, congratulations. And yes, I don't think anybody would ever give you a 0 unless you did something that was completely inappropriate. So yes, 0 through 30 are the points in which judges evaluate. Now, those speaker points are extremely important, and I will tell you a little bit later why they are important. Oh, this is why. Okay, so you all will get the opportunity to participate in rounds. Debate rounds are about an hour and a half long for each round, which is why I said you don't just get to say your opinion, you just don't get to talk all freely, because that would take way too much time, way more time than what we had. So at a tournament, I want you all to think about it like a NBA top 16 bracket kind of thing. Each tournament, you'll have what are called preliminary debates. Your debate rounds that happen, you get to have them just for coming to the tournament. Depending on how big the tournament is, it will determine how many preliminary rounds they have. Teams with winning records will clear to elimination debates. Elimination debates normally have panels, which means they'll have more than one judge, and each one of those judges will give a decision, and you will keep advancing in the tournament based off of your seating in the bracket the more you win. Speaker points act as tiebreakers. They also tell you and help you to assist with knowing what seed you will be in the tournament on the bracket. And the real fun part and the benefit about tournaments is there's often award ceremonies. Award ceremonies where you are rewarded for speaker points, for team activities such as team sweepstakes, bringing a lot of people, participating. It really just depends on the tournament for the different awards that will be happening. So that is one of the benefits of going to a tournament, but also sometimes you get to travel. I'm not sure what that looks like anymore, but tournaments are hosted all across the place, different schools, different opponents, and you just get to debate and meet different people. In order for any of those things to happen, though, we have to fully understand what an argument is, because debate is just another set of arguments with another set of arguments. So I'm sure some of you may already know this from English or writing essays, but a complete argument requires these three things. The first is a claim, the second is a warrant, and the third is the impact. Claim, warrant, and impact. These are the most important things you will probably learn from debate. A claim is a statement. It is something that you have said. A warrant is what supports your claim. An impact is why it is important, why it matters, a consequence to your action, what will happen as a result. So let me give you an all example. My claim is that the United States federal government should provide universal health care. That is my claim. The United States federal government should provide universal health care. My warrant is currently the United States does not provide universal health care. The impact is that we were unable to prevent many deaths due to lack of resources for COVID-19. People died. My claim, the United States should have universal health care. My warrant, the United States currently does not have universal health care. The impact, many people died due to the pandemic because there was lack of resources and access, right? That is the impact, our consequence to our action. That is the result of what happens because of my claim. That is how you create a full argument, having those three pieces: a claim, a warrant, and an impact. For debate, to fully understand policy debate, you must understand stock issues. Stock issues consist of inherency, harm/advantages, solvency, significance, and topicality. Inherency explains the status quo. It tells us what is happening. Inherency is a great way for us to understand why the affirmative matters and the significance that the affirmative presents. The present course of action is insignificant to cope with this problem. Absent preventative or corrective action, the problem will continue to incur. This is inherent. There are three forms of inherency. The first is attitudinal. The second is structural. The third is existential. Attitudinal inherency explains the attitudinal barrier or structure that is preventing the plan from happening. The structural inherency is the barrier or law that is holding the plan back from happening. Existential inherency addresses the fact that there is no law that exists to address the harms that the affirmative is talking about. Existential means there is nothing there. That law does not exist. There is a lack of, meaning there is a true inherent need. Structural, there is literally a law in the way. There is a barrier. There is something that is preventing the plan from happening or the possibility of the plan. Attitudinal, a great example of attitudinal inherency would be there is no such thing as an anti-lynching law because people do not believe in Congress that there needs to be one. It is the attitudinal understanding for why that is not necessarily important. Those are the three forms of inherency. The second stock issue I'm going to introduce you all to is harm/significance. This understands that there will or is a significant problem that is happening. The harm, the current thing that is happening. The affirmative must demonstrate that something bad is happening now and that the harms are important or significant. So an example of this would be economic decline. I would say currently, due to COVID-19, the economy is having a hard problem and won't be able to recover. This is a significant problem because there could be several negative impacts as a result. Now, each affirmative must provide some form of solvency. Solvency is the ability for the plan to solve. The plan is sufficient to solve the problem or at least to mitigate to a significant degree. There must be some form of solvency advocacy or advocate. This would be the agency, the actor, the method in which they choose to solve. Affirmative must use evidence to prove that their plan solves the problem they have described as significant harms. If a plan doesn't solve any problems, the judge won't vote for it. If the plan does solve a significant problem, we call that an advantage of the plan. 1ACs are sometimes organized into different plan advantages. So an example of this is you might see something that says advantage 1, global warming, right? This would be a title to an advantage that would describe a way in which you would begin to understand how you are going to solve for global warming. What is the mechanism that the first affirmative has attempted to do to resolve the solvency that they are attempting to achieve? Now, if you do not believe that a plan follows the resolution or the topic, then you would read what is called topicality. The plan is not an example of the sort of action called for by the resolution. So if you don't think that it has anything to do with forensic science, sentencing, or policing, if you don't believe that affirmative affirms the resolution, then you would say that this is not an example of the resolution. A plan is an example of the resolution. Whether a plan does what the resolution says should be done, if the plan does not support every word of the resolution, the affirmative team may not actually be supporting the resolution. So the way you do that is by looking at what the plan supports. Does their plan actually follow any of the topic areas that are provided? And if it doesn't, then is it actually topical? Is it something that the resolution calls for? And if it's not, then you would read topicality. Now, there are different levels to topicality and different functions to understand a full topicality argument. So the first thing that you would do is you would provide what is called an interpretation. An interpretation would be a definition. You would explain the definition of the word or the piece of the resolution that you do not believe that the affirmative has created. The definition is the evidence that defines one or more important words in the resolution. After that, you would find a violation. A violation is an explanation of why the affirmative plan is not example of the kind of action described by the resolution. It answers the question of why does the plan violate the negative's definition? And the third thing you would do is reasons to prefer the negative definition. So arguments about why the negative definition is better for the debate than other definitions and words being contested. If the affirmative offers a different definition, why should the judge prefer the negative definition? Then there are voting issues. So reasons why the affirmative should lose if the negative wins topicality. The two main reasons are education and fairness. We will get the opportunity to go further in detail about how to answer topicality, as well as all the different components of topicality. But those are the four pieces necessary to understand the resolution. Because remember, policy debate is unique in the sense because we have 1 year with the resolution. So it's important for us to follow that topic because we have 1 year to provide significant amounts of research around this one thing. So this is the end of my lecture. This is all I have for you all. I know that was a lot of information to digest because learning policy debate is one of the most difficult things to do because it is one of the hardest forms of debate because it is the most challenging, but it is also the most rewarding. So I definitely encourage you all to go back, look at this video, take some more notes, think about the things I've said, and begin thinking about claim, warrants, and impacts, taking your notes and flowing, and just learning the structures and the speech times of debate in order to be an effective and efficient debater. I look forward to seeing y'all throughout the week, and I'm happy I was able to tell you all what policy debate was. Thank you.